Okay. Just start over again. Just the beginning of the Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses the case. A person says, again, the point is to his fellow. It's not that officially he appointed an agent to represent him, to go marry a woman on his behalf. He says to his friend, to his fellow, that I'd like to marry this and this woman. If you meet her, marry me on my behalf. And he identifies the woman. And he went. Rather than marrying her, representing the one who asked that he should be represented, based on the principle of Shlich Shalom Kamoso, he married her for himself, Mekudeshes, L'Sheni. She's married to the second, not to the first. So we discussed Tosfos yesterday. What's the Kiddush? It's understood. I mean, if he says to the woman, I want to marry you, and he doesn't mention any of the background information, that initially the man wanted I should represent him, then he says, Harei Mekudeshes Li. Right? So of course she's married to the second. His intent is to marry her. Her intent is only to be married to him. She's unaware of the original person. So Tosfos explains it, speaking that initially when he comes to her, he says, so-and-so asked that I should represent him to marry you. However, I want to marry you. And she understands that. And she says, Harei Mekudeshes Li. He says Li. So the question is, does the Li mean referring back to originally what he had told her? Or does the Li mean clearly, although Li means clearly me and not him? That's how Tosfos learns. Okay, not getting into that now. So let's skip to the Gemara. Tono. We learned in the Braisa, Masha also, meaning it's a valid marriage. She's married to the second man. But rather, he acted in a deceitful way. It's not an appropriate manner of behavior. It's Ramos, deceitful. His behavior is unethical behavior. You know, the Gemara says in Bava Metzia that Riya is Einokone. Let's say a person is walking and he sees something. And he says, he sees a $100 bill. He says, I see $100. Somebody else goes and picks it up, ownerless. So the Gemara says, Haboto is Einokinyon. Although the other person saw it first, but that's not a king, that's not an acquisition. So therefore, if the other person takes it, it's rightfully his. Because Habota Einokinyon, being mabit, gazing upon it's not, although you discovered it first, what about being unethical? Is it unethical? See, there it's not. There it may not be unethical. You know? If I tell you to acquire something on my behalf, and rather than acquiring it for me, you acquire it for yourself, that's because it's unethical. Because you noticed it first, does that make it yours? I'm not saying it's refined behavior, but we're talking about derech Ramos. Ramos is much more extreme. This is deceitful. This is unethical behavior. That's something else. Right. That the Gemara discusses that case also. That's a separate case. But if Habota Eino Koneh, it's not. Once had a case many years ago. Woman, she was a lawyer, not religious woman, and she says, you know, Jews, they behave unethically. She herself, she was Jewish. She says because when they do a deal and they don't make the other party fully aware, even though it's not they're selling something, which they're not disclosing anything. But the other person should ask questions, doesn't ask questions. It's not the person that is misleading the other person. But factually, if the other person would have known such and such stuff, he would have paid less. So why did the seller reveal it to him? Yeah, this woman, as we're talking about, she sees, that should be the obligation of the seller to the buyer. That if there, whatever it may be, you have to divulge everything regarding that. Otherwise, that's called unethical. I said, I disagree with you. Something which is a problem, and it's expected that you should disclose, of course, then that's wrong. But what you have to, when you sell something, you want to do the best deal. You're not misleading the person. It's not unethical. You want to be a tzaddik, you want to be devout, you want to be whatever, that's your decision, that's your prerogative. But as a seller, that's not, you've compromised compromise on your ethical standard. It's not. It's habota. I noticed it. And somebody else says, oh, that's the case, I'm going to take it. Because we're going to discuss the Gemara in the next case, next plot. Oni amapech v'charoro. So machlokes we've shown what exactly it is. If a person's going and he invests tremendous due diligence in a deal, and then afterwards somebody goes and he grabs the deal from the other person. Not he asked him to represent him, and he takes the deal away from him. Is that considered unethical? So machlokes we've shown it. You understand? Let's say you have a lost item, so you understand, hefker, you don't find certain types of things in the street always. And a person's trying to get it, and you go and you grab it before he has a chance to get it. This question is that if you have a poor man trying to get a biscuit, and before he takes the biscuit, where he's in need of the biscuit, you grab it from him. The Gemara says that's Russia. He's considered Russia. That's his classification. Well, we'll discuss the case. I'm just giving you just a general outline on it. Of course, this comes up very often. There's a certain piece of real estate on the market, a certain house, and another person comes and says, I'm willing to pay more for it. Person wants the house. He invested tremendous time. Word got out in the community he wants it. Somebody comes. He's able to afford to pay more, takes it away from the first person. The person invested tremendous time, did whatever he went to contract almost, and because he offered more money, the seller agreed to sell to the second person. Is that called Russia? Is it considered Russia? But the buyer himself is the one who will see throughout Shas. Sometimes the buyer is like, we have a principle known as Lefnei Vid L'Sita Michshol. Who created the snare? If the new buyer would have offered more, the seller would have sold it to the first person. It's only because the second person came into the picture, therefore he complicated things. Let's say legally he could back out. No. Rabbanan, that's called Misha Porad, where a man actually gives money for movables. So, wait a second. No, but on a Torah level, it is an acquisition. Rabbinically, they nullified it. Because since factually money was already given, which on a Torah level is recognized as an acquisition, but we nullified because it's in the best interest of the buyer. Therefore, that's the reason why the seller cannot renege. But let's say it's just verbal. The Gemara above calls that Mechushay Amono. If a person says, "I will sell you something," and then afterwards he backs out, he backs out on his word, doesn't? He's not called. He's called Mechushay Amono. He's not a man who keeps his word. Because the Gemara says regarding measures, it says hin tzedek. Hin usually means a measure which is a liquid measure. Hin tzedek. So the Gemara says in Bava Metzia, hein shelo tiyeh tzedek. When you say yes, you're agreeable, you go through with it. So the Gemara says over there, it's interesting. A person says to somebody, because I like you, I'm going to give you $50,000 as a gift. It's called matona meruba. It's unheard of. Who ever heard of giving these kinds of gifts, right? So, and then afterwards, the gifter says, something, and the man says, when he give me a gift, he says, I'm not giving it to you. And the man's disappointed. That's not Mechushay Amono. Of course, that's called gullibility. The one who originally believed he was going to get that kind of gift, he's gullible. But if something which is within reason, that the average would believe that he would receive it, so then the man has a right to be disappointed. Because people do give it, so that's called, you're reneging on your word. That's called matona muetis. A small gift, which a person only would, that's considered lacking in refinement. You're not unethical, but it's lacking in refinement. You should keep your word. The person has to keep his word. That's the Gemara above Mitzvah. So over here we say, the Mishnah says, the Brisa says, even though the man who married the woman for himself, but nevertheless, Elishnog bo minig rabos. So the question is, but our Mishnah doesn't mention it. The Brisa says explicitly, when he marries the woman for himself, the behavior is considered deceitful behavior. It's unethical behavior. Does our Tana concur with this? Does he agree with this? Or we say maybe no. So the Gemara answers, Tanidan holach nami. The word holach in our Mishnah is superfluous. Could have said, the word holach is superfluous. So why does the Tana insert the word holach? He went in a deceitful way. That's to allude that his behavior is deceitful. It's unethical. Holach biramos. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was very exacting in the words that he used. What does he write the word holach? What does he tell me? A story over here? Right? In Agarata, you could say maybe, if it's within a Agaric context, you want to elaborate. But in halacha, where you're able to deduce things one way or another way, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is very specific. If you don't know, okay, there are many things we don't know. If you take a look in the Ramchal writes, he has a section called on Agodos, and he speaks about Torah Sheba'al Peh, the Ramchal, and he says that everything is, Torah Sheba'al Peh is what we call Masorah. So when we say, just as Nigel is Masorah, Nister of Torah is also Masorah. And Nister is preserved. What is Nister? He says Nister is not available to everyone. You have to be at a special level to be qualified to understand the hidden meaning of Torah. And he goes to explain. And what was the Masorah? The Masorah was not only the facts, but it's how to extrapolate it, how to draw it out from the Torah Shebechsav, or even from the Gemara. And there's a famous in Bechoros, the Gemara speaks about mermaids. Mermaids, half man, half human being, woman, half fish. The sailor, so on and so forth. So there's one commentary in the back of the Gemara says, you see Chazal weren't always accurate in facts. That's what he writes. Because he writes this over there, many people don't study his commentary, because that's already Haskalah. I'm not going to mention who it is. You could study that commentary. Okay? It's okay, you could study it. It won't affect you. Okay? So the Ramchal writes that very often you find information in Shas. I mean, the Torah is what is halacha. But yet you find that in Shas, historical information, scientific information, physical information has no relevance to Torah. What is it? So he says, the Ramchal, it was only a means to communicate the Nister of Torah. We need something, a model of something, because that has a certain level of representation. And if you know the key words and the code, when we discuss that, that represents something else. So the fact is irrelevant whether it's true or not. Whatever was believed at that time to be, they used that as the means of concealment. That's what the Ramchal writes. So the fact does not have to be. In halacha, it has to be correct. That has to be accurate and absolutely correct. But anything which relates to anything outside of halacha, scientific, whatever the belief was of that particular time, they used that belief or that understanding to conceal, although they knew differently. It's irrelevant. That was a means of concealment. And he says very often, sometimes if you read something on a diagonal and you skip every third letter, these are the codes, then you're able to understand the Nister of Torah. So Chazal, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, or Ravina Ravashi, when they compiled Shas, they weren't only writing the Nigel of Torah, they were, for posterity, they were recording the Nister of Torah. I'm just quoting what the Ramchal writes. Okay, so I'm saying, so therefore every word was written with a specific intent. But which word precedes which word? Why? He could have written it, the paragraph structure or sentence structure could have been different. So why did he structure it in this way? Again, on the Nigel level means nothing. Doesn't mean anything. But on the Nister level, on the concealed level, it has great significance, because if you understand the codes, whether you read it on diagonal or every other line or every other word you skip, and then you understand what it's about. Definitely. That's what the Ramchal writes. Okay? Well. Okay? We say over, we just had, the Gemara said, you find throughout Shas Chasuri Mechser. What is Chasurim Esrei? Something has been deleted from this Mishnah or from this Brisa. I mean, what was an oversight? I mean, the whole concept of Torah Sheba'al Peh, so-and-so says the name of so-and-so, and so-and-so says the name of so-and-so. And where did it happen? Rabbi Gamliel went to the shuk to buy a cow for his son's wedding. What are we getting so detailed, all this? It could be for the other reason. Again, this is to ensure the accuracy of the transmission, right? It's not we're playing a game of telephone over here. Everything has to be definitely accurate, accurately quoted. And the Gemara says very often there were certain Amoroim, because they didn't review sufficiently, they weren't relied upon. When they said over something, you couldn't rely on them. You know, you heard what they said, but to say that this is going to be the basis and the link of Masorah, definitely not. You can't rely on them. One second. So what's Chasurim Esrei? So the way it's explained, why Torah Sheba'al Peh on a Torah level, you're not supposed to record it. It's not supposed to be committed to writing. The Gemara tells us in Tamur, Rabbi Yudan Nasi, because he realized, based on a pasuk in Tehillim, Eis lasos Hashem hefer Torah secho, because of the Roman persecution, what happens if people start forgetting? It's the end of Torah. So therefore, because it says Eis lasos Hashem hefer Torah secho, if Torah is going to be nullified, that's the overriding factor. He recorded Torah Sheba'al Peh. That's why Torah Sheba'al Peh was recorded. So, but factually, even though it was recorded, there is an element that it has to retain the Torah Sheba'al Peh characteristic. See, he deleted, he left intentionally certain things out that you have to rely on your memory to understand what's written. So it's not totally the written, it's still connected to the what? To the mind, to the memory. It's Torah Sheba'al Peh. And it's interesting. The Mishnah, the most classical written work outside of the Torah, Lahavdil, is the Mishnah. The Hebrew, the Rambam, you read the Rambam in his Hakdama to Yad Chazaka. He wrote it in a way with a level of genius that it lends itself to memory. That when you read the Mishnayos, the text that he wrote and the words he chose, it's easy to memory. It's easy to remember. That to commit to memory. But without the Gemara says in Bava Metzia that who are the Mavli Ha'olam, who are the destroyers of the world? The ones who rule from Mishnayos. Because without the Gemara, you have no idea what the Mishnah is saying. You know, a person's next to the Mishnah. You know, he won the Mishnah contest when he was 6 years old. You understand? But that's not enough to rule. Without the elucidation of the Gemara, elucidating what Rabbi Yudan Nasi meant to write, you're still in the dark. So even without the Chasurim Esrei, the text of the Mishnah is not sufficient. These are only the signposts to activate things in your mind to understand what it means. But without the Gemara, it's not possible. And even with the Gemara, we still have Chasurim Esrei. And even with the Gemara, we have endless Rishonim we need to elucidate the Gemara. So it comes out very interesting. Kodesh Baruch Hu, at one time, people had different levels of memory. We don't have the same, we're not able to retain things the way we used to retain them. But could be, the Gemara tells us, it's a medrash that after Kabbalah Torah, originally if the Klal Yisrael wouldn't have been choti with the Egel, it says anything we studied would have been etched in our minds, in our hearts forever. You would not forget. No, you wouldn't have to review. You wouldn't have to review. But because of the Chet Egel, there was shikha. The letters, when the Luchos Rishonos were broken and the letters floated up, that was the equivalent of shikha. The letters fading out, forgetfulness, forgetting, lishkoach, right? So that was it. But it's only because of that. So it comes out interesting. There is always an aspect of memory which is crucial for Torah. So it comes out that could be that's the Torah Sheba'al Peh, right? You always have to, in your mind, it's not only when you review or you think about something. When you think of something, you don't have a safe with you. There's no Chazon Ish. He was very machmir regarding Eruv. And very often, students would come to his house on Shabbos, young boys, and they would come with their Chumoshim, with the Mishnayos. And when they would come, he'd say, leave it. Come back after Shabbos, pick it up. because he was very machmir in regard to the laws. You know, the Eruv he felt wasn't kosher enough. That's the one thing he used to tell the children to leave their mishnayos or the chamoshim at his house. And also told them, especially this was right, you know, talking about the 40s. Children used to wear, every child wore shorts. You know, not in the winter. Even in the winter, he wore knickers, whatever he wore. So very often the child, when he would study, he would touch it, put his hands on his lap. So he was touching the skin. So Chazon Ish said it's a problem because you know the halacha is, you know, if you're studying Torah and you put your hand in your shirt and you touch your flesh, you have to wash your hands. And the Mechaber says it's kosher l'shicha. Causes one to forget. I mean, here you're trying to study and you put your hands on your lap and you're touching your skin. So he would encourage the children also, not because of modesty, just because if you're studying Torah, you're undermining what you're trying to accomplish. That was the Chazon Ish. So Chazon Ish said that especially on Shabbos, that you can't carry, a person for Shabbos should memorize an Omed Gemara. So when you walk in the street, you should be able to review what you studied. That's what Chazon Ish used to say always, because you're not able to carry a sefer on Shabbos. So I'm just saying, it's also that's Torah Shabbat Peh. So the memory has to play is a crucial part of Torah. What hola? What hola?
No, often we'll say, why did the Mishnah bring the last page or the third page or whatever, and then it gives an answer like, because the Mishnah wanted to be symmetrical. Is that for the purpose of Nistur, or is that for the purpose of...
That's a Nigla answer.
That's the Nigla answer. But
Right.
there's a Nistur
Right?
answer as
Correct,
well.
correct. Okay. Maishno Hocha, that's the reason why, you know, you study, you know, from the Odd Scroll in the English, you're missing 3/4 of, besides not getting the sense of what the Amoro, what the Tan is saying, you're losing even to be able to infer from the language, and many things you're missing it. You know, although, you know, you understand the general concept, but it's more than understanding the concept. So now the Gemara asks a question. Now Mishnah says a person who says to his fellow, go and marry a woman. I saw the Rishonim ask, what is Omer L'Chaveru say v'Kadish L'Isha? Omer L'Chaveru, Kadish L'Isha. What's it say? Go out and marry a woman for me. Right? Andrew, what would you say? What's it say? So they say, the Rishonim say, we have the Mishnah, at the beginning of the second paragraph says, mitzvah yosem b'mishlucho, that if a person is able to do a mitzvah, or delegate a mitzvah, it's best he should do it himself, should not delegate it to a shliach. So tzei means if the woman would be present, he should not do it through shlichus, because mitzvah yosem b'mishlucho. So therefore, omer l'chaveru tzei, meaning the woman is not available here, she's elsewhere. So because he has no choice, he's not able to do it himself, that's the reason why he's delegating it to a shliach. That's what Tana uses the term tzei v'kadish l'isha rather than say kadish l'isha. To allude to this point, it's only because it's tzei, that's why it's okay, it's proper, or it's not a problem to do it through shlichus. Okay? So now the Gemara asks a question, Ma'ishno hocha diktoni omer l'chaveiro, or Ma'ishno hosam diktoni omer l'shlucho? Rabbi Yehuda Nosi. Beginning of this parak, he says, one who says to his fellow, go out and marry a woman for me. This particular woman. There it says, omer l'shlucho. He says to his agent. Agent means he was designated as an agent. By using the term fellow rather than agent, and they're saying agent, each one is telling me a chidush. Something novel. What does he tell me? Shluchu to have a ramoy. The somcha date. Sovar ovidli shluchusik. Why is it considered deceitful, unethical? I appoint you as my official agent. Go marry this woman for me. He's maybe even paying him a fee, right? And then, rather than marrying the woman on behalf of the one who designated him as his agent, he marries the woman for himself. So I relied on you, right? There's a principle, no, shlichos or shlichuso, right? There's a halacha that if you have untithed grain or fruit, produce, and you ask somebody, tithe the produce on my behalf, and then afterwards you want to go and you want to eat the produce. You want to eat the produce. So this is very, very important. We have a chazaka. The produce has a cheskes tevel, right? The presumed status is it's untithed, right? So now the question is, before you eat of the produce, do you have to verify whether it was tithed? You have the question. David. You have tevel, untithed produce, grain, fruit, whatever it may be. And you say to a person, tithe this particular produce on my behalf. And now you come a few hours later or a day later, now you want to partake of the produce. That produce initially had what? Had a cheskes tevel, right? The presumed status was initially, it was untithed. Do you have to know with definiteness that it was tithed before you're able to eat it? Or you have a right to rely on a presumption that since you asked him at the tithe, he actually carried out your request. And he did tithe it. What's the halacha? Well, if it's a suffix, you have to go after chazaka, right? So that's the question. Are you permitted to eat it or are not permitted to eat the produce? It has a cheskes tevel. So the Gemara says, chazaka shlichus shlichusa. There's a presumption that when you delegate something with shliach, a shliach carries out the shlichus. He did the agency. So you have no reason, as long as it's within the period of time that he probably did do the agency, the presumption is he definitely did the agency. He carried out his tithe and he permitted to eat it. So a person appoints a shliach. Why? Because a person has a certain degree of responsibility, integrity. He's asked to and he accepts the responsibility to tithe, he will tithe. I ask you, be my shliach to marry a woman. I'm relying on you. And you know I'm relying on you. And rather than marrying the woman for me, you marry the woman for yourself. I would think that's unethical. Right? That's ramai. That's deceitful. But if I say, by the way, you're going there. If you meet this woman, could you please marry on my behalf? See, it's not, I'm officially appointing you as my agent. I mean, it would act as agency, but it's not an official appointment of an agent. So I would say that maybe it's not ramai. Because the man didn't rely on me. He didn't know whether I would or not. No, that's not the point. That's not the point I'm making. I'm the conflict of interest. No, I'm not making that point. We're talking about, it says somcha date. If a person knows you're relying on him, the person will act more responsibly. If I ask you to tithe and he knows I'm relying on you, that's why the person will carry out whatever that request was, because I'm relying on you. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just bringing that as an example is that because the one who delegated, the person to do the tithing, is relying on him, so therefore, by not carrying it out, would actually create a problem for the person who asked him to tithe. Something that means I'm relying on you. A person knowing that he's being relied upon, that gives him a greater sense of responsibility to carry out the request. But why? Correct. So what I'm saying is, in the case of the shliach to do the marriage, why can't you assume the same thing? Because the case is almost the same. There's a self-interest there. No, you would assume the same thing unless you know otherwise. We are saying, we're saying you assume the same thing. He will carry it out. He will do. That's why, if he doesn't, factually he did not. That's why it's deceitful behavior. But again, I'm not saying there's. Yeah, but it's again, the point is, I'm relying on you. I'm relying on you. If let's say the one who asked him to marry the woman, if he had any inkling that he would marry her, take her for himself, he would have asked the man. Correct? We're not talking about testimony here. You're right. A person that has any degree of conflict of interest, testimony is disqualified.
We have a situation straight up in the Chumash, in the Torah, where the wives of certain men were so beautiful that they were worried that other men and that others might desire their wives. You know, Abraham Avinu with his wife, the same thing happened with Yitzchak. So a man wants to betroth this woman. She's the most beautiful woman in the world. And he asks this other man to be his agent.
We're talking about marriage. We're not talking about rape. And we're not talking about taking him into his harem.
I understand.
They're not comparable.
So the man representing, if he says his eyes on what to do not maybe
Who thinks that way?
I think David says there's a real possibility.
David has just disqualified himself from being an agent in this context. Okay, most people don't think this way.
So I'm saying with Hevel, it's not the same.
I'm not saying A is B. I'm not saying they're the same. I'm just saying conceptually, it's reliance. If I rely on you, disappointing the one who actually asked you to carry it out where I lied, I'd say only there, that's where you consider it. That's deceitful behavior. But if it's not something I had a right to rely on you, you were doing me a favor, so therefore I have a right to do what I want. So maybe that's not called deceitful behavior. Mishnah says, no, that is deceitful behavior. You know what a mountain out of molehill is?
No, I think it's crucial to understand that.
Okay.
If I have an incredible deal, and it's a real incredible deal, to buy something, and I say to this man, the agent, please go and consummate the transaction. And he arrives and he takes it for himself.
Are you disappointed? It's deceitful.
Back,
But
but
why is deceitful? Didn't you know up front that the average person would take it?
that's my point.
No, the average person would not take it. Unless has that kind of personality, he wouldn't do it. Because it's unethical. You really, so are most people out in the market unethical? If they are, you're right. So they're unethical people. That's the standard of society. They're unethical.
If that was the standard, then
No, but a person, you put a person in a tremendous. I was thinking to myself yesterday, the mega lottery was won, $550 million. So the man who has the ticket says to this person, go and claim it. Okay, there's no, the ticket is not numbered, nothing. I would say to myself, I'm not going to do it. I'm doing it myself.
That's comparable to this?
Isn't it?
No. How is it comparable to this?
Just an agent?
No, it's not. It's not comparable. I mean, okay. 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 Let's go a little further. Okay. Okay. Let's go further. So therefore, that's the chiddush. That even though it's not the same degree of reliance, nevertheless, since he asked him, it's still considered it's deceitful, it's unethical. Hosam revusa kamashmal. What's the case at the beginning of the second parak? A man says, appoints a shliach, I want you to marry a woman at a certain location. And we gave the example. Marry a woman for me in New York City. When you meet her in New York City, marry her. But elsewhere, he didn't say elsewhere not. But what did he mean? Only there? Is the agency there and nowhere else? When he asked him, if you meet the woman, he says, if you see the woman, meet the woman at New York City, marry on my behalf. A fellow, not a shliach. So what? And he happens to meet her in Philadelphia. There is no question, Ein Mukadeshes. Why? Because I mentioned New York to indicate I didn't expect you were going to go to Philly to find her, because you're not my official agent. So you only could act as an agent only in the context that I asked you to act on my behalf. The Sova lo Torach, because since you're not my official agent, you're not going to accuse to go anywhere else other than if you happen to be there anyway, marry me. Avo shlucho the Torach, but a shliach who's officially appointed as a shliach, he may be paid a fee. Emo maramokamu though, when he said New York, because he believed that's where she is. But he didn't mean, you're only my agent in New York and not elsewhere. So I would say, so if she's the agent elsewhere, so if he marries elsewhere, she's Mukadeshes. Kamashal, no, it's not Maramokum. It's not only to identify the location where she is, you're only my agent there and not elsewhere. Therefore, even the Shliach, if he marries elsewhere, ain't Mukadeshes, because he does not function in capacity as a Shliach. You don't need it. This is not it. You my shaliach. Shliach is not kinyan. If I transfer something, no, it's not a condition. I want you to be act on my behalf there, not elsewhere. Finished. That you're my shliach. You're not me elsewhere. That's not a condition. It's not a condition. That's the definition of the shlichus. I want you to marry Sora, not Rochil. So is that a condition? You're my agent to marry one, not to marry two. You're my agent to act on my behalf here and not there. Finished. Now, the Gemara tells over a story. Ravin Chasida. It's interesting. He was a Chosid. He was known. So if he was referred, the Gemara refers to him as Ravin Chasida. That means he was known for his Chasidus, for his being devoutly pious. Ozla Kedush Leg Itzis Olebrei. He went to marry a woman on behalf of his son. Kitchel Nafshi. Okay? Rather than marrying the woman for his son, he saw she was a good catch. He married her for himself. Right? She'd make a good rebbitzin. No. Well, the son evidently asked him. Or he knew the son, well, you can't represent your son unless he's aware that you want to represent him. I mean, Tosa speaks about it, has to do with the Gemara in the second parak. So Mar asks, this is Rav Chasida? B'atanya Masha Osi Osui Elishinok B'minig Ramos? I mean, how could we even refer to him as a Rav Chasida? This is deceitful behavior. So evidently, there's something wrong over here. Here he's going to marry for the son, then he chooses to marry the woman for himself. Otherwise, he couldn't marry the woman. It says, he went to marry this woman on behalf of his son. And then rather than marry for the son, he married for himself. But how could he marry? How could he? That the Gemara says earlier that you can't. Tosa says it's speaking about originally the father said to the son, if I meet a girl who's appropriate for you, would you want me to represent you? Because it's considered the disrespect that a son should use a father as an agent. So the father offered this to the son before he went. He says, if I meet a nice girl that I think is appropriate, would you want me to be your agent? And the son said yes. Yeah, the son is fully relying on the father. This is like Homel Chavero. It's not an official agent because that would be a disrespect. But it does make a difference. Let's say it was a specific woman, a specific family. Same thing. Would you want me to marry a woman from this family on your behalf? And the son says yes. Yes. And that usually would be the case. If I find an appropriate girl for you, would you want me to marry on your behalf? He says yes. That's like, and he gave all the various, the profile of the type of woman. He says yes. And he finds that profile woman, and rather than marrying on behalf of the son, the exact profile, and he marries on behalf of himself. So it says, so how do you behave this way? It's minig ramos. So Mar answers lo yavu nelly, meaning when he suggested the match, the family says we're not interested in your son. It's not he went and he did something ethically. He married him for himself rather than from son. The family rejected the suggestion of the son. They weren't. We're not interested in your son. Iboy. So Mar asked a question, but even I make iboy le lo duye. But what does it appear to be? It appears to be deceitful. See, he should have informed the son before he married her, by the way, they're not agreeable. Therefore, I'm going to marry her. He was concerned, but in that interim, somebody else may come and grab and marry the woman. So since there wasn't enough time to inform the son, Therefore, he married her rather than informing the son first, to be continued.